Have you ever wondered what happens when justice and vengeance meet under a full moon? I must warn you that the story you're about to hear is not for the faint of heart. What I'm going to tell you actually occurred in Galena, Nuevo León, in 1872, and to this day, the inhabitants of this small Mexican town lower their voices when someone mentions the cemetery drunkard. They say there are nights when the silence in Galena's cemetery is broken by distant laughter and stumbling footsteps, and those who have been brave enough or foolish enough to investigate these sounds are never quite the same again. But to truly understand this story, we must go back to that fateful night that changed everything. The town of Galena had always been a quiet place where merchant wagons and horse riders marked the passage of time. In those days, news traveled slowly and strangers were rare. However, in the spring of 1872, a series of macabre events began to shake the peace of its inhabitants. It all started with the discovery of several profane acts in the local cemetery: desecrated graves, dark rituals, and objects stolen from the deceased. The community was terrified, and the rurales, as the rural police were known then, were under immense pressure to find the perpetrator. After weeks of investigation, they finally managed to capture the culprit, an outsider who had arrived in town months earlier, presenting himself as a seller of remedies and ointments. No one suspected that beneath his common appearance lurked an individual capable of committing such atrocities. The evidence was overwhelming, and the trial was swift. In those times of post-reform Mexico, justice was ruthless, and capital punishment was considered a necessary solution for the most serious crimes. The execution was scheduled for a full moon night. The chosen location was, ironically, the same cemetery where he had committed his crimes. The rurales considered it would be a powerful message to anyone who thought of following in his footsteps. What no one could foresee was that fate had prepared a macabre twist in events. That same night, Jose Martinez, a well-known town drunk, had decided the cemetery would be a good place to sleep off his intoxication. It wasn't the first time he had done this. The townspeople were used to his eccentricities. Jose was a kind man when sober, though mezcal turned him into an erratic wanderer. That night, he lay down on an ancient tombstone, using his hand-woven serape as a blanket, completely unaware of the events about to unfold. The firing squad arrived shortly after midnight, their torches casting dancing shadows among the wooden crosses and limestone tombstones. The full moon bathed the cemetery in spectral light, and the wind whispered through the cypresses as if trying to warn of the imminent tragedy. As they prepared the condemned man for his execution, the noise woke Jose from his drunken slumber. What happened next was etched into the collective memory of the town as one of the most terrifying nights in its history. Jose, disoriented and stumbling, rose from the grave just as the rurales were about to give the order to fire. In the spectral twilight, his figure emerging among the tombs, with his serape waving in the wind and his erratic movements, created an image that froze the blood of those present. The rurales, prey to panic and the superstition so common in those times, opened fire without thinking twice. Their minds, clouded by fear and the stories of the undead that abounded in 19th century Mexico, couldn't rationally process what they were seeing. The bullets from their muskets tore through Jose's body, who died without even understanding what had happened. His blood mixed with the sacred earth of the cemetery, and his last breath was lost in the night, taking with it the possibility of any explanation. The condemned criminal, witness to the whole event, began to laugh hysterically, a laugh that would soon turn into screams of terror, because what no one knew was that the real nightmare was just beginning. The following days were a whirlwind of confusion and guilt in the town. Jose's death was recorded in the parish books as a tragic accident, and the rurales involved tried to go on with their lives. But something had changed in Galena's cemetery. Night watchmen began reporting strange sounds, drunken laughter that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, stumbling footsteps that left no traces in the earth, and a persistent smell of mezcal that appeared and disappeared without explanation. The first rurale to experience the drunkard's revenge was Sergeant Ramirez, who had given the order to fire that night. A week after the incident, he began seeing Jose's figure on every corner, in every shadow cast by candlelight. His colleagues found him one morning in his house, huddled in a corner, mumbling about laughter and footsteps following him. 3 days later, his body was found in the cemetery, on the same tomb where Jose had taken his last nap. The official cause of death was a heart failure, but his face showed an indescribable expression of terror. One by one, the rurales involved in Jose's death began experiencing similar phenomena. Some resigned and left town on horseback, others succumbed to madness, and still others were found dead in mysterious circumstances, always with the same smell of mezcal permeating their clothes. The criminal who had escaped death that night suffered the worst fate. For months, he lived tormented by appearances of the drunkard, who followed him day and night, whispering in his ear words that no one else could hear. The townspeople saw him wandering the cobblestone streets, talking to himself, begging forgiveness from a ghost only he could see. On a full moon night, exactly 1 year after the incident, his body was found in the cemetery, surrounded by empty mezcal bottles. The town doctor declared he had died of hypothermia, although the night had been unusually warm. Since then, Galina's cemetery has become a place where the living dare not remain after nightfall. Nocturnal visitors report encountering a stumbling man dressed in period clothing, who offers them a drink from an invisible bottle, only to disappear among the tombs when they try to approach. Others claim to hear laughter and incoherent conversations that seem to follow them as they walk among the tombstones. The town elders warn young people not to mock the story of the cemetery drunkard, for they say those who do often experience inexplicable phenomena. Bottles that move by themselves, footsteps that follow them in the darkness, and that unmistakable smell of mezcal that appears at the most unexpected moments. Justice and vengeance intertwined that night in 1872 at Galina's cemetery, creating a story that continues to haunt subsequent generations. Some say Jose's spirit remains in the cemetery because he seeks justice. Others believe he simply found in death the perfect place to continue his eternal drunkenness. If you ever visit Galina and hear laughter or stumbling footsteps in the night, remember this story. And if you detect a strong smell of mezcal when walking near the cemetery, don't turn around, because you might find yourself face to face with the drunkard who never rests, always looking for company to share one last drink. If this story chilled your blood as much as it did mine, don't forget to leave your like and share in the comments if you know any similar story from your region. Subscribe to our channel for more terrifying tales based on real events, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any story. Remember, popular legends often hide truths darker than we imagine.